Hello, my name is Dr. Luke, and I am together with my group mates Andre Enriquez, Annika Fung, Jonah Tarriela, Joshua Gamban, and Gwyneth Fung. And we are Group 3, and we are going to be talking about the mathematics behind decision making, pattern, logic, and choice. What stood out to me in this module was how mathematics functions as a universal language, one that remains consistent no matter where you are in the world. Unlike spoken languages that differ across cultures, mathematical symbols and structures mean the same thing to everyone. A graph, an equation, or a function communicates an idea instantly, without needing translation. I also realized that mathematics doesn't just describe quantities, it expresses relationships. Concepts like variables, functions, and patterns give us a way to represent real-life situations in a precise, compact form. Instead of long explanation, a simple expression can capture an entire idea. Another thing that I appreciated is how math encourages us to move from the concrete to the abstract. We might start with something familiar, like counting objects or noticing patterns, and eventually represent them using symbols or models. This shift from real-world examples to abstract representations is what makes math powerful. It tells us generalize, predict, it lets us generalize, predict, and understand things beyond what we can physically observe. Finally, I found it interesting how mathematical language is built on structure, definitions, symbols, and notations that all work together. Once you learn how to read it, you start to see connections everywhere in nature, in technology, and in everyday decisions. It's like discovering a deeper layer of the world that was always there, just waiting to be interpreted.
So for me, the most striking part of this module was realizing that mathematics allows us to communicate without ambiguity. In everyday conversations, words can be interpreted in different ways depending on context or tone. But in mathematics, every statement has a clear, definite truth value. It is either true or false, so there's no room for confusion. This clarity is incredibly useful not only for solving problems but also for thinking and decision making. So, learning about logical laws like De Morgan's laws and rules of inference like modus ponens showed me that strong reasoning follows a clear structure. It's almost like math gives us a blueprint for forming valid arguments. I was also fascinated by the truth tables, how they systematically lay out all possible situations to ensure an argument truly makes sense. After this module, I found myself becoming more mindful about how I phrase statements, analyze claims, and evaluate whether something logically follows. Mathematics, in this sense, is a language that guides us toward clarity, consistency, and sound reasoning.
Now we will move on to mathematics in nature and the arts, starting with nature. Even if it's not obvious, math is actually everywhere. It's the foundational structure behind the beauty we see in the world. We often think of nature as wild, but it's actually full of precise patterns and geometry. Take the sunflower for instance. If you look closely at the center, the seeds form crisscrossing spiral patterns. If you count the number of these spirals, one set going left and one set going right, you will almost always get specific numbers like 34 spirals one way and 55 the other. This is called the Fibonacci sequence. It's a famous pattern where every number is the sum of the two before it 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on. Nature uses this mathematical rule to pack seeds as efficiently as possible, ensuring there is no wasted space and every seed receives sunlight. Connected to that sequence is the golden ratio. As the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence get higher, the relationship between them gets closer and closer to this divine proportion of 1.618. If you divide any Fibonacci number by the one immediately preceding it, like 55 divided by 34, the answer consistently approaches that 1.618 ratio. We can apply this to the sunflower, but to show you just how universal this is, let's move from the land to the ocean. We can find the golden ratio in nautilus shells. As the shell grows, it expands by this exact ratio, allowing the creature to get bigger without ever changing its shape or balance.
Now for math and arts. Although it may seem that math and art are on two different spectrums, many artists actually use mathematical principles such as proportion, symmetry, and geometry to create works that feel naturally balanced and pleasing to the eye. For example, the golden ratio appears in many of Leonardo da Vinci's works, like the Vitruvian Man and the Mona Lisa, which helps shape the proportions of faces and bodies and entire compositions. Even techniques like perspective in the Renaissance paintings use math to create depth on a flat surface. Whether it's classical art or modern design, mathematics acts as an invisible guide that structures what we would consider as art or aesthetically pleasing. Now, did you know that concepts found in math and nature and in arts can also be connected to how consumers perceive or react to different kinds of advertising? Ever wonder how advertising materials, such as logos and posters, make you feel drawn to it, or think that it just naturally looks right? Well, that's because advertisers use the golden ratio and Fibonacci based structures to design logos and layouts that feel naturally harmonious to the human eye. Products arranged with these proportions often appear more attractive and trustworthy because we instinctively respond to these patterns. Moreover, techniques like the rule of thirds help photographers and designers place key elements exactly where our eyes tend to focus. Even product packaging uses symmetry and geometry to create a sense of balance and professionalism. And it's through these strategies that math subtly influences how we perceive ads and can even affect what we choose to buy.
For mathematics and decision sciences, math gives us a structured way to make better decisions. Instead of relying on our instinct, we use tools like decision trees and cost benefit analysis to break down choices and compare possible outcomes. For example, in deciding whether or not to launch a new product, a decision tree can map out scenarios like high or low demand and show the potential profit or loss for each. This helps us identify which option has the best expected result. We also use probability to estimate how likely each outcome is, and optimization to find the most efficient or beneficial solution. Overall, decision science shows that good decisions come from using mathematical models to weigh options, reduce uncertainty, and choose what makes the most logical sense.
Whereas the past modules discussed so far more so implicitly influence our decision making, like what Annika mentioned about how natural ratios are used towards advertising, decision sciences is perhaps the most explicit way people use mathematics in order to influence the decisions they make in day-to-day life. Instead of reiterating the points we discussed in class, and you because you probably all of you probably already know of it, I will instead try to give some concrete examples as to how Nash equilibrium, how game theory can be specifically applied in day-to-day life. Say you have two competing stores engaging in a price war. If one lowers the price, they get more customers. If both lower the prices, they both lose profits. If none lower prices, both get to keep their profits. Essentially, this is a real-life version of the prisoner's dilemma, but less extreme. It's a less extreme form. Um, More concretely in real life, this can be attributed or compared to Globe versus Smart in the Philippines and their mobile dating promos, wherein they try to react or preempt each other's moves as the price drops. An extensive form example could be something like an employer or an employee negotiating for their contract, where an employer starts an offer that is slightly below the optimum offer or what the employee wants, and therefore the employee counters with a more predictable amount. This is essentially an example of how extensive form games, predict negotiation dynamics. Let's move on from money and let's go to a more daily real life example of where you might encounter game theory. Let's say both you and your friend want to go out to eat, but you want to go to a ramen place and your friend wants to go to samgyeopsal. At the end of the day, what really matters is this time you spend together. But if you communicate differently or you disagree, what leads to a negative outcome for both. You both go your separate ways. We go back to a 0-0 outcome. Knowing this, the Nash equilibrium is that if your friend decides to choose S, samgyeopsal, you're better off choosing S as well in order to really enjoy the time you have together. If they decide to choose with a ramen place, that's good, also good for you, and you're both happy. But if you don't know what the other person wants, a back and forth of ikaw na lang bahala, ikaw na lang pumili, this makes the 0-0 outcome all the more likely. This highlights the real life importance of having good communication and how miscommunication could lead to both parties feeling down, feeling miserable. And with that ends our presentation. We talked about how different aspects, different modules in GE Math MW influence how we implicitly or explicitly make decisions. How mathematics as language can convince someone of choosing something or the other through logical reasoning. How patterns repeating in nature can be used to create more enticing advertising, and more explicitly, again, as what we talked about earlier, how decision sciences can make you a more efficient decision maker. And with that, again, we would like to thank you for listening. We are again our group true, group three. With that, thank you and goodbye.